I am 47 years old, and most mornings I wake before the sun rises over Austin. The light creeps slowly through the blinds, touching the framed photos on the dresser. Reminders of years that should have meant something. 15 of those years belong to Hannah, my wife. With her came her son, Dylan, a boy of 3 when I met him. His father, Michael, was already a ghost by then, the kind of man who drifts in and out of a child's life like smoke through a cracked door. He'd appear with a toy, a smile, a half-hearted promise, and vanish before the week was out. When I married Hannah, I told myself I wasn't replacing anyone. I would simply be there. I would show up, day after day, until my presence was stronger than the memory of absence. I believed in that kind of steady devotion, the kind you build like a structure, slow and precise, brick by brick, until the walls of trust are strong enough to hold a family. And for a time, I thought I succeeded. I drove Dylan to school every morning, rain or shine. I was the one who picked him up when he scraped his knee at the playground, the one who stayed up late to finish a science project after Hannah fell asleep. I was there through baseball seasons, broken bats, and rainy weekends spent watching games on the couch. When he turned 10, he called me Dad for the first time. It slipped out by accident. He was asking for the car keys, and when he said it, I froze. I wanted to stop time right there. He didn't notice what it meant, but I did. For years after that, I wore that word like armor. That it wasn't just a name, it was proof that my patience, my quiet labor, had meant something. That I wasn't just the man paying the bills and fixing the pipes. I was the one building something real. But families have strange economies. They trade in loyalty, and loyalty, I've learned, isn't paid in effort. It's written in blood. When Dylan reached 17, something shifted. Maybe it was inevitable. Teenagers drift, that's what people say. They pull away, test their edges, try on new identities. I told myself it was normal. But this was different. His father had reappeared, suddenly full of energy and vision, talking about legacy, family name, real connections. Michael had a way with words. He could spin neglect into mystique, irresponsibility into rebellion. And Dylan listened. He listened because Michael spoke in the language of fantasy, the same language every boy wants to believe, that the absent father was never careless, just misunderstood. Started small. Phone calls in the evenings. Texts that made him smile in ways I hadn't seen in years. Then came the comparisons, subtle at first. Dad says tech has a better engineering program. Dad thinks I should aim higher. Dad said you shouldn't stress so much about money. Each dad was a dagger, dull from repetition but cutting deeper every time. And each time Hannah said nothing. She'd purse her lips, maybe change the subject, but her silence grew heavier with every conversation. Then one night it happened. We were sitting at dinner, just the 3 of us. The smell of Hannah's chicken casserole hung in the air. Dylan had just gotten back from a visit with Michael. He was quieter than usual, eyes fixed on his plate. I asked him about college applications. I'd already paid the deposit for Texas Tech, secured housing, even set up his student account. I said it casually, trying to sound supportive. He looked up at me then, calm but cold. "You don't have to worry about that," he said. "Michael's covering it." I smiled at first, a reflex. "Oh, that's news to me." "Yeah," he said, shrugging. "He said he doesn't want me depending on someone else's money." Someone else's money. Hannah's fork clinked against her plate. Dylan didn't notice. He kept talking about dorms, about travel expenses, about the car Michael promised to help with. His words came easily, like he'd been rehearsing them. Finally, I said, "It's good he's taking responsibility. I just want to make sure you're taken care of." He didn't meet my eyes. "You don't need to. I mean, I appreciate everything you've done, but you're not really my parent. This is between me and my dad." There it was. It didn't sound cruel when he said it. That's what made it worse. It was matter of fact, a line recited from someone else's script, a truth handed down, not discovered. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Hannah's eyes darted between us, searching for a place to hide. I just stared at him, memorizing the distance that had settled in his face. "You're right," I said finally. It's between you and your father. And that was it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I didn't remind him who packed his lunches or sat through endless PTA meetings or paid for braces and cleats and summer trips. I didn't list the invisible labor that had built the very foundation of his comfort. Because what good are facts when love has already chosen its side? That night, I lay awake beside Hannah, staring at the ceiling. The air in the house felt colder, thinner. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath his room. I thought about all the years I'd poured into that boy, all the quiet moments when I'd chosen patience over pride, and how easily one sentence had erased them. Hannah turned toward me. "He didn't mean it," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "He did." The words weren't angry. They were tired. A kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. In the days that followed, I moved differently. I spoke less. I stopped offering advice. I watched from the edges as Dylan talked to his friends about universities and financial aid and the life that waited for him beyond our walls. He laughed more when he mentioned Michael. And every time he said Dad, it landed like a closing door. But beneath the quiet, something else was taking shape. A thought so small I almost missed it. If I was not a parent, then I was not obligated to act like one. It wasn't anger. It was arithmetic. Correction of balance. Years of effort weighed against a single truth. I had given everything to someone who had already decided I didn't count. And once that truth settled, it didn't burn. Clarified. Because love without recognition isn't love. It's labor. And I had labored long enough. The morning after that dinner, the house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. There's a kind of silence that hums beneath routine, the silence that comes when love turns to formality. Hannah made coffee. Dylan left early for school. I sat at the table, hands around my mug, staring at the faint ring marks left by years of breakfasts and late-night talks. Those stains were the history of my effort, proof that I'd once been needed here. But need is a fragile thing. Once people learn they can survive without you, they start pretending they always could. I didn't make any decisions that first day. I went to work, came home, nodded through dinner. I listened to Dylan talk about dorm life, about how Dad was going to help him get a car for campus. I said nothing. I let him talk himself deeper into a fantasy I no longer intended to fund. That night, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at me like a tiny pulse. One heartbeat for every bill, every tuition payment, every sacrifice I'd made under the illusion of family. I opened the banking app and saw the tuition deposit I'd paid months ago. It wasn't due yet. The number sat there, waiting, patient, obedient. I clicked withdraw. The sound was almost nothing, a faint confirmation tone, but it felt like thunder in my chest. Then I went down the list. Dorm reservation, canceled. Emergency credit card, deactivated. College fund account, renamed, locked, removed from shared access. I didn't do it out of vengeance. It was clarity, executed line by line. If I wasn't a parent, then my name didn't belong on those lines. Hannah didn't notice at first. She was too busy planning the celebration. Dylan had started receiving acceptance emails. She hung the letters on the refrigerator, right beside old photos of his baseball days, the ones where Michael sometimes appeared, frozen forever in brief returns. When Dylan got his official acceptance from Texas Tech, Hannah cried. She called her sister. They planned a family dinner. I smiled when they told me, nodded when they thanked me. I didn't mention that I'd already withdrawn every cent tied to that dream. That night, while they celebrated in the living room, I sat outside on the porch, the air thick with early summer heat. I could hear their laughter through the open window, muffled, distant, almost like the echo of another life. I thought about the years behind me. The scraped knees, the long drives to baseball tournaments, the nights I'd stayed up finishing homework with him while Hannah slept. I'd done all of it because I believed love could replace blood if you gave enough of yourself. But all I'd built was a structure made of invisible labor, something that looked solid until someone decided it wasn't. A week later, Dylan came home waving an envelope. "It's official," he said. "I'm in." Hannah hugged him, tears shining in her eyes. I stood a few feet away, smiling politely, an outsider applauding from the back of the crowd. Then he said it, "Dad's going to help with the dorm deposit." I nodded, slow and calm. "Good for him." He grinned, full of teenage certainty. "It's going to be great." He said he's got friends in Lubbock who'll help me settle in. "Sounds like he's really stepping up," I said. He didn't notice the edge in my tone. He just kept talking about cars, about summer jobs, about all the things he and Michael were going to do together. That night, I removed him from the family phone plan. His card went inactive within minutes. The notifications came through in a quiet rhythm. Payment declined. Auto bill canceled. Card frozen. Each alert was a heartbeat of detachment. 2 days later, the storm broke. I was in the kitchen when Dylan walked in, phone in hand, eyebrows drawn tight. "Hey," he said, "my card isn't working." "Probably an issue with the bank," I said, stirring my coffee. "Did you cancel it?" I looked at him. "You said I wasn't your parent, remember? So I figured your real dad should handle your expenses." The words landed slowly, like cold rain on hot pavement. He laughed short, disbelieving. "You're kidding." "I'm not." His jaw tightened. "That's messed up." "So was what you said," I answered. He stood there, angry but unsure how to fight a battle he'd started himself. Hannah came in halfway through, towel in her hand, trying to smile. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I said. "Just a conversation about responsibility." She frowned. "Michael, please." "Don't," I said quietly. "Let him handle it. He's grown." Dylan left the room muttering curses under his breath. Hannah waited until he was gone before speaking. "You're being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate." She shook her head. "You can't just stop helping him. He's a kid. He's a man when it's convenient. He's a kid when it costs something. I'm done paying for both." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Over the next week, the silence in the house thickened. Dylan stomped around, slamming doors, muttering about money, about how Dad's trying to fix things. But stuff takes time. Hannah tried to mediate to calm us both, but she didn't understand. There was nothing to fix. The equation was balanced now. A few days later, Dylan's college portal updated. His housing deposit had been flagged as unpaid. His spot was on hold. I didn't say a word. I watched him pace the living room, phone pressed to his ear, trying to reach Michael. I could hear the panic rising in his voice. "You said you had it covered, Dad. You said it was fine." There was a pause. Then softer, "Okay. Yeah. I'll figure something out." When he hung up, his face was pale. He didn't look at me. He went upstairs, the sound of his footsteps uneven. Later that night, I found him sitting in the dark kitchen, head in his hands. His phone buzzed on the counter. Another payment reminder. He looked up as I entered. "Need help?" I asked. He hesitated, pride warring with exhaustion. "No, I'll manage." I nodded. Good. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. I wanted him to see what words cost when spoken carelessly, how quickly pride turns to hunger when reality arrives. A week passed. The house grew quieter. Hannah stopped asking me to reconsider. Dylan stopped talking altogether. Then one night he knocked on my study door. His face was drawn, his voice small. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course." He sat down, hands trembling slightly. Dad can't pay." He said he thought I had it covered. "I don't know what to do." I watched him, the same boy who once called me Dad without meaning to, now trying to rebuild the bridge he'd burned. "I'm not angry," I said, "but we're going to do things differently now. I'll help, but you'll carry your part. You'll work. You'll pay for your books and meals. You'll earn it." He nodded, eyes wet. "I understand." For the first time in years, I believed him. When he left, I sat in the quiet again, surrounded by the faint hum of the house. Somewhere upstairs, a door closed gently. Not in anger this time, but in recognition. I realized then that silence, when earned, can sound like respect. And for the first time since that dinner, the air in my home felt clean again, like balance had finally found its way back through the cracks. For a few days after that talk, the house seemed to hold its breath. I could feel the quiet like weight pressing on the walls. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deliberate, every movement measured. Dylan stayed in his room mostly. Hannah floated through the house like a ghost that didn't know which side to haunt. And I just kept breathing, slow and steady, like a man who'd finally surfaced after years underwater. People think withdrawal is an act of cruelty. It isn't. It's the act of letting gravity do what love has refused to. I wasn't punishing Dylan. I was simply allowing him to experience a life unpadded by my sacrifices. He'd built his identity around a man who never stayed, and sometimes the only way to unlearn that illusion is to watch it collapse in real time. The first crack in his defiance came quietly. I was reading in the living room late one evening when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Dylan appeared in the doorway, his shoulders hunched, his voice small. "Do you need any help with the lawn tomorrow?" It was such a simple sentence, but it caught me off guard. He hadn't offered to help with anything in years. "I could use a hand," I said, pretending not to notice the tremor in his tone. He nodded once, almost relieved, and left without another word. The next morning he was outside before I was. The heat was already crawling up from the pavement, and he stood there holding the mower like a soldier waiting for orders. He worked hard, quietly, without complaint. When we were done, I handed him a bottle of water. His hands were shaking slightly. "Thanks," he said. That word, thanks, felt heavier than any apology could have. It was small, imperfect, but real. Later, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, searching job listings near campus. He looked up when I entered. "Do you know if the bookstore on campus hires freshmen?" he asked. "Usually," I said. "They like students who can handle early hours." He nodded again, then hesitated. "Would it be okay if I use your name as a reference?" That question hit harder than anything before it. He didn't ask out of obligation. He asked because, somewhere in him, respect was trying to find its way back. "Of course," I said. "You can." He smiled then, small, uncertain, but honest. That night, Hannah said, "He's changing. I can see it." "People change when they run out of lies to live on," I said quietly. She flinched but didn't argue. By the end of that week, Dylan got the job. Minimum wage, part-time, stocking textbooks, and cleaning shelves. He looked proud when he told me. I could tell it wasn't the job itself that mattered. It was the fact that he'd earned something that didn't come from pity or inheritance. The following Monday, he handed me a folded check. "What's this?" I asked. "For the books," he said. "My first paycheck. I want to cover my share." I didn't open it. I just stared at him, remembering every year I'd spent begging for recognition that never came. And now it was here. Quiet, unannounced, wrapped in humility. "Keep it," I said finally. "You'll need it more than I do." He looked like he wanted to argue but didn't. Instead, he nodded, the way a man does when words aren't enough. That night, I sat alone in the living room again. The house wrapped in that same heavy quiet, but this time it didn't feel empty. Felt earned. Weeks passed. Dylan adjusted to the rhythm of work and classes. He still called Michael sometimes, but the calls grew shorter. I knew because I could hear the tone in his voice afterward. Not angry anymore, just tired. Disillusionment always arrives softly. One evening, he came home from campus with grease on his hands and exhaustion in his eyes. "I got a flat tire," he said. "Pulled over, changed it myself." "Good," I said. He smiled, proud and sheepish at once. "I remembered how you showed me that one summer." Something in my chest loosened. "Glad you paid attention." He hesitated, then said, "I called Dad first." He didn't answer. Then I realized I didn't really need him. The words were quiet, almost an afterthought, but they carried the weight of a confession. "Everyone needs someone," I said. "Yeah," he replied. "But not everyone deserves the title." He went upstairs before I could respond. That night, I found the old photo albums Hannah had tucked away in the closet, the ones filled with Dylan's childhood. There were pictures of his birthdays, school plays, vacations. In the earlier ones, Michael appeared smiling beside Hannah, holding the boy like a trophy. Then, gradually, he vanished. Frame by frame, the man faded until the space beside Dylan was always empty. I closed the album and realized that for 15 years, I'd been standing in that empty space, quietly holding the shape of someone else's absence. And for the first time, I no longer resented it. I simply understood it. A month later, Dylan had his first real crisis at school. A car accident, minor but enough to shake him. The phone rang around midnight. I woke instantly, heart pounding. "Is this Mr. Carter?" The voice on the line asked. "Yes," I said. "Your son was in a minor collision off campus. He's fine, but you're listed as his emergency contact." For a moment I couldn't speak. The word son echoed through me like a delayed heartbeat. When I got to the scene, Dylan was standing beside a tow truck, pale and nervous but unhurt. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped in relief. "I'm okay," he said quickly. "I know," I said. "You called the right person." He looked away, embarrassed. "They asked who to call. I didn't even think. I just gave them your number." I put a hand on his shoulder. "That's enough." The paperwork listed me as his father. No middle initials, no clarifying notes, no parentheses. Just Father James Carter. I didn't correct it. Neither did he. On the drive home, he stared out the window. The night lights of the city flashed across his face. Boy and man tangled together in each reflection. After a long silence, he said, "I never realized how much you did." "You weren't supposed to," I said. "That's what being a parent means." He nodded, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't tell him I'd been waiting years to hear it. I just said, "Good. Now live like you mean it." By the time we reached home, he'd fallen asleep in the passenger seat, the way he used to when he was little. I sat there for a minute, engine running, staring at him. The boy who once told me I wasn't his parent now slept like he trusted the air between us again. The next morning, Hannah watched him head off to class, backpack slung over one shoulder. "He's different," she said. "People grow when they're finally allowed to fall," I said. She nodded, eyes damp. "You did the right thing." Maybe I did. Or maybe I just stopped doing the wrong thing for too long. In the weeks that followed, Dylan kept working, studying, living. Our conversations became shorter but truer. He didn't ask for money anymore. He asked for advice. He sent photos from campus, smiling, tired, proud. Each one ended the same way. "Love you, Dad." And every time I saw those words, I felt that long closed door creak open, just enough to let the light back in. But balance has its own strange ways of testing itself. One afternoon, Hannah called me into the kitchen. She held a letter, her face pale. "It's from a debt collector," she said. "They're trying to reach Dylan. Something about his father. Michael, of course. His shadow, even in absence, still managed to touch what he'd abandoned. When Dylan came home that weekend, I showed him the letter. His hands shook as he read it. "They can't make me pay," he said quietly. "No," I said, "but they'll try." He looked at me, fear and clarity mixing in his eyes. "I'll handle it." And he did. He contacted a campus attorney, filed the paperwork, cut every legal tie that bound him to Michael's debts. For the first time, he chose to stand on his own name, not the one that failed him, but the one he'd earned through action. When it was done, he sent me a text. "Handled it. Love you, Dad." I stared at those words for a long time, then set the phone down and whispered to the empty house, "Finally." Because sometimes, recognition doesn't come through words or gifts or apologies. It comes through choices, quiet, irreversible choices that rewrite what family means. And for the first time in 17 years, I didn't feel like a man holding up someone else's home. I felt like a father whose silence had finally been understood. The house did not change shape, but it changed weight. Chairs scraped softer. Doors learned to close without slamming. Even the refrigerator hummed like a gentler machine. That's what recognition does when it finally crawls in. It quiets the rooms where shouting used to live. Weeks passed like a slow tide. Dylan worked, studied, called me when something confused him, texted me when it didn't. He didn't ask for money. He asked for time. That was new. That was everything. I kept waiting for the old gravity to return, for the orbit of Michael's talk to pull Dylan back into its showy ruin. Didn't. The phone calls tapered off. The fantasy curdled into fact. Debt letters, missed promises, the familiar smoke. Words are cheaper than rent. He learned that lesson the hard way. Hannah watched it all with the reverence of someone visiting a restored chapel. She spoke less. She listened more. One night she sat beside me on the porch and said, "He sounds like you now." Slow. Sure. I looked at her profile in the porch light and wondered if she finally understood that steadiness is not a mood but a practice. I didn't say it. I let the crickets answer for me. Dylan's paycheck came every other Friday. He kept most of it like we agreed, but he insisted on handing me something small each month. A folded bill, a receipt, proof that respect can be printed and signed. I never demanded it. I never gloated. I just nodded and placed it in a plain envelope. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the math. 'Cause effect. Debt paid. The first honest addition we'd ever done together. Then came the night with the tow truck and the word father typed beside my name. I told myself paperwork is just paperwork, that forms are not feelings. But I kept the carbon copy in my desk anyway. Some relics are worth archiving. Understanding doesn't arrive like a dawn. It arrives like a draft under the door. You notice it only after the room has cooled. I noticed it in small ways. The way Dylan cleaned the sink after he cooked eggs. The way he asked Hannah if she needed anything from the store before he left. The way he texted me a photo of a receipt and then wrote, "Covered my books this term. Feels good." Should have been boring. Felt like a psalm. But families do not heal in straight lines. There was one more bend in the road, sharp enough to cut. It began with a message from an unknown number. A link. A photo of Michael in front of a rented car, arms wide, captioned, "Road trip with my boy soon, watch the space." Dylan sent it to me with no comment. Hours passed. Then came the call. His voice was flat. "He wants to visit campus. Says he can introduce me to people." I waited. Silence. Then, do I owe him that? A year ago he would have asked, "Can I go?" Now he asked about debt. Progress has a shape. It looks like that question. "Meet him if you need to," I said. "But bring your own wallet. And your own exit." He laughed. A thin sound, but real. "Got it." They met at a chain diner off the highway. Dylan told me later that Michael arrived late, smelled like cologne and gasoline, and started the conversation with a story about a man he almost knew. Connections, always connections. When the bill came, Dylan reached for it. Michael lifted a hand, dramatic, then patted empty pockets and said he'd left his card in the car. Dylan paid. He texted me a photo of the receipt with one word. Lesson. That night Hannah cried in the kitchen without the performance of it. No slam drawers, no declarations. Just quiet tears into a paper towel at the sink. "I used to hate you for being so calm," she said. "Now I see it was the only thing in this house that wasn't lying." I didn't absolve her. I didn't accuse her. We stood there in a clean, hard silence that felt like truth finally allowed to stay. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. A letter from a creditor addressed to Dylan, care of our home, threatening action over an account that was never his. Michael's shadow printed in legal ink. We sat at the table, Dylan, me, Hannah. No yelling, no panic. I explained the steps. He took notes. We walked through forms, affidavits, clean severances. He scheduled an appointment with the campus attorney. He went alone. On the day of the meeting, he wore a collared shirt I'd bought him years before and never seen him choose. He sent me a photo outside the office door. No caption. The image said everything. A boy dressed like a man because he'd decided to be one. He texted 2 hours later, "Done. My name is only mine." I read it twice. I sat down. I let myself feel the victory without tasting triumph. This is what fatherhood looks like when it isn't busy auditioning for applause. Quiet correction. Unadvertised scaffolding. The roof stays up. No one thanks the beams. After that, calls with Michael stopped. Not out of fury, out of fatigue. Dylan didn't block his number. He outgrew it. There's a difference. If you've ever watched a tide pull away from a shore that used to own it, you know the sound. It's not a rip. It's a long, wet no. We settled into a new weather. I drove out to Lubbock twice that month with a toolbox and a trunk full of groceries he swore he didn't need. We fixed a leaky sink. We argued about the right oil weight for his old car and laughed when the clerk told us we were both wrong. We ate burgers in the parking lot and planned nothing. On the way back to campus, he said, "I keep thinking there's something I'm supposed to say." I shook my head. "Just keep showing up." He nodded. He did. Hannah softened in the edges that had once been all blade. She stopped protecting ghosts. She started asking me questions and waiting for the answers. She made more dinners and fewer excuses. One evening, she placed a box on the table filled with old Snapsh *TS of Michael and said, "I think these belong in a life that isn't ours." I didn't touch them. I let her carry the box to the garage. We are all responsible for our own altars. Dylan began to call me at odd hours, not for help, but for witness. A good grade, a lousy shift, a girl who made him nervous. He didn't couch his stories in apology or perform respect like a trick. He spoke to me the way men speak when no one is keeping score. I answered the same way, brief, honest, present. I won't pretend the past evaporated. Didn't. Some nights I still hear the old sentence echo through the rafters. "You're not really my parent." It visits like a draft and leaves like one too. When it does, I walk the quiet house and touch the backs of chairs and the cool edge of the sink and remind myself that love is not a verdict. It's a ledger. I used to write in it like a beggar. Now I write like a steward. The real turning point, the one that clicked like a lock, arrived on a Sunday evening in early fall. Dylan had driven home to surprise Hannah for her birthday. We ate on the porch. The city glowed. Distant sirens braided with the sound of cicadas. He handed Hannah flowers bought with money he earned stacking shrink-wrapped boxes of other people's futures. He handed me a folded paper and said, "Read it later." I slipped it into my pocket. When the dishes were done and the house had gone still, I sat at the table and unfolded the paper. It was not a letter. It was a copy of his updated emergency contact and beneficiary forms. Under father, he'd typed my name. Under relationship, he'd chosen parent. No parenthesis, no asterisk, no compromise. There was a short note at the bottom. 5 words, square handwriting, no flourish. "I trust what shows up." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled like a man whose ribs had been loosened after years of tightening bolts around a heart that kept working anyway. I put the paper back in the envelope and slid it into the drawer where I keep the quiet proofs. A bent ticket stub from a game he loved. The small wrench he used to change that first flat. The duplicate key he made for our house without asking. Like a son who assumes there will always be a door to open. People ask about forgiveness as if it were a switch. It isn't. It's a pattern. I forgive when he shows up. He shows up more. The pattern writes itself. We become family not because the word demands it, but because the behavior justifies it. That's the order. Word last. Work first. Lately Dylan ends our calls with the same sentence. "Love you, Dad." The first time he said it after everything, I almost didn't answer, afraid to bruise it. Now I say it back and the word doesn't wobble in my mouth. It stands. It stands because it has weight. It stands because it took a cost to carry. Here is the lesson I wish I had learned sooner. A man who pays for everything will be thanked for nothing until he charges the right price. Not cash. Boundary. Without it, generosity curdles into tribute and love rots into hunger. I starved myself for years at a table I set. Now I eat what's served. Small portions, honest food. Nothing stolen from my own plate to feed a fantasy. Michael will always be a name in our story. Some men are chapters. Some men are footnotes. He taught my stepson the difference between noise and care. For that, I am, if not grateful, then finished with hating him. There is more dignity in sweeping up the glass than in arguing with the stone that broke it. So this is my confession, simple and unadorned. I stepped back not to watch him fall, but to give him something true to push against. He chose the hard thing. He chose to work. He chose to stand under a name that had never left. In choosing independence, he chose me. Tell me, then, after years of paying for a seat at a table where your presence is mocked and your offering is expected, would you have kept serving? Or would you have done what I did and finally asked the only question that matters? Who here is willing to earn their place?